Welcome to the audio version of Conjured BTS, a BTS fanfiction by Zmelio. Episode 9, When Are We? April? Yoongi considered if his dream was in a different month, how else was it different? What year? Guy looked at Yoongi like he was a little crazy, but replied, 2018. Yoongi was shocked. It's 2018? Before the pandemic. He hadn't thought too deeply about Seokjin's dream before, but now that he has, it was strange that the pandemic was never mentioned, and the girl went into a crowded school as if nothing ever happened. Yoongi surmised that his thoughts swirling around his head forced into his mind the idea to give him some answer to the dream that would explain it away. Guy asked, "Yeah, what year is it for you? Is this the future or the past?" Yoongi came back to his thoughts. He considered giving a wrong answer to see what the dream would do, but the dream felt so real. On the slim chance that it was real, he didn't want to lie to an army member. He admitted this would be the past. Yoongi's brain felt a little foggy, but he saw Guy motion with his hands in his peripheral vision. Well, unless world peace suddenly breaks out in the near future, I don't want to know. Yoongi was torn. A statement like that made him believe the dream wasn't real. Perhaps Guy knew something, or perhaps he was just incredibly pessimistic. Either way, Yoongi replied, you don't want to know. They stepped outside. Guy snagged Yoongi's sleeve again. He looked both ways before pulling him onto the street. There was a bit of snow on the ground, which felt strange to Yoongi because he didn't feel the cold, and because in his mind it was June. Guy turned them both to look down the street and said, "Look up, Yoongi. I present to you the Brooklyn Bridge." Yoongi whispered it all. "That's the Brooklyn Bridge?" "Yes, that is the one," Guy replied, with a bounce in his step. "Want to walk it?" Guy looked at Yoongi with a smile. Yoongi looked back at Guy curiously. That may have been the first time Yoongi saw him smile. It started to improve his mood, and he smiled back, which made Guy look even happier. It reminded Yoongi of times catching someone's eye at a performance, and their excitement built off each other's. He was genuinely curious now about walking the Brooklyn Bridge. "Where does it go?" Guy laughed at Yoongi's ignorance. "Manhattan." He pointed across the river. "See the Empire State Building?" Yoongi laughed with embarrassment. "Wow, okay." Guy rubbed his chin and added, "We'll pick up some blintzes from Teresa's on the way." After a few minutes of walking, they reached a street lined with businesses. Guy stopped at a small white-faced building with a green and white striped awning with the words Teresa's Restaurant displayed above. Guy told Yoongi to wait there while he went in and returned with a brown bag. And they continued walking. The streets were less pristine than Seoul's, but somehow cozy and comfortable. "I don't remember New York being like this," Yoongi mused. Guy shrugged. "Well, this is Brooklyn. You've probably only been to Manhattan. Each of the boroughs have their own style." Yoongi explained that in 2018 they were only just becoming famous in America. BTS only grew bigger in the future, and it felt like that they couldn't go anywhere and have an experience like a normal person. It left them feeling isolated and lonely. Guy admitted that being lonely was the worst feeling in the world. Yoongi noticed a flash of sadness on Guy's face, but they were at the bottom of the stairs to the bridge. Guy pressed forward quickly up the steps, and by the time they reached the top, Yoongi was out of breath and forgotten to follow up on it. "How are you in such good shape?" Yoongi wheezed. "What?" Guy replied shyly. "Oh, well, I walk and lift things a lot in my job. I run part of a warehouse." "Whew!" Yoongi caught his breath. "I'm sleeping well tonight." Guy laughed some more, which encouraged Yoongi to keep playing it up. He bent over a bit and moaned, inducing more of Guy's laughter. "You may have to carry me." Halfway across the bridge, they stopped, and Guy passed out treats from the bag. "What are these called?" Yoongi asked. After a bite, Guy responded, "Blintzes. Teresa's is the best." After almost 2 years of pandemic lockdown, Yoongi wasn't used to businesses greeting customers that walked into the stores. "Good thing it's open," he commented. Guy scoffed. "Why wouldn't it be open? It's been here for 30 years. Yoongi, not wanting to ruin the mood with bad news of the near future, shook his head. No, I mean, never mind. He quickly changed the subject. This view is amazing, Guy. The view was, in fact, amazing. Everything down to the smallest detail felt perfectly real. Seokjin was right. This dream felt extremely genuine. Genuine? Yoongi marveled at the random English word. He was going on incessantly, which means without end. Yoongi continued to enjoy the new vocabulary. Sans fin. Is that French? Seokjin didn't say anything about being multilingual. Guy looked at Yoongi with bemusement. I did use a word voila in my line. Maybe that means you can speak a little French. Yoongi let his thoughts fly. D'accord, un peu de français. Très bien. C'est incroyable. But I don't speak French. Guy rubbed his neck, clearly sorry for disappointing Yoongi with his lack of understanding. Yoongi gave him a pat on the arm to signify it was okay. He placed his hand on his heart and continued, je m'excuse. He shook his head. Pardon-moi? He growled at himself and concentrated harder. I'm sorry. It almost happens without thought. He waved his arms. All this new vocabulary, what I wouldn't give to write lyrics so fluently in Western languages. You know, this dream is exquisite. Is this what transpires in Namjoon's mind on a continual basis? He looked squarely at Guy and spoke with sincerity. Thank you so much for this. Guy laughed, but he could feel the emotion welling up inside him. You're welcome. I'm so glad you like it. He was interrupted by a chime of a text on his phone. Kevin, are you still moping? Guy, no, I'm out. Kevin, you're kidding. Guy, no. Kevin, alone? Guy, no. Kevin, prove it. Send a pic. Guy, no. Guy looked up from his phone and apologized for the interruption. Sorry, my annoying brother. You think we could take a picture for me to show him later? We could try, but Seokjin said no one can see him but the girl, so I doubt it would show up. Yoongi hadn't quite pinned down what was wrong with Guy, but he knew he was starting to feel for him and didn't like disappointing him about a picture. Still, he continued to explain, besides, I don't think I'm in New York in April 2018. That was our first BBMA performance, but that was in Las Vegas. Guy nodded. Yeah, that's true. He would never believe me. He'd say I was crazy. He was more disappointed with his brother than in the situation. Yoongi changed the subject. Where are we going next? Guy put his hands on his hips and looked towards Manhattan. How about some baseball in Central Park? Once they crossed the bridge into Manhattan, they took a subway north to the park. Yoongi had suggested walking, but Guy explained that it was almost 5 miles, and they could always walk back on the way back if they were up for it. Yoongi's achy calves agreed. Sitting on the bench seats of the subway, Guy peppered Yoongi with questions about his life in Korea. Yoongi answered as best he could, but confessed that he hasn't been living the life of an average Korean for years, and he held back telling Guy that no one in Korea was living a normal life during lockdowns. He changed the subject, asking Guy about himself and his family. As he talked about his grandparents who emigrated from Korea, Yoongi glanced at everyone's mask-free faces looking in his direction. Right now in Korea, BTS was hoping for a concert for the first time in ages. But even if it happened, there would be restrictions. Everyone had to wear a mask, and there's no cheering. Yoongi frowned at the thought of not seeing Army's faces when he looked at them like the subway passengers were looking at him now. Yoongi paused. The other subway passengers weren't looking at him. They were looking at Guy. Guy, who was having a conversation with an invisible person. Guy, Yoongi interrupted Guy's story and looked back at the other passengers. Guy followed his gaze and looked around at the many people staring at him. He straightened in his seat and looked forward. Surprisingly, that put most people at ease, and they went back to their thoughts and phones. Yoongi could see Guy's embarrassment, and his heart ached for him. Yoongi looked around and noted the detail and sensation of what had to be a dream. You know what, Guy? Yoongi asked rhetorically. BTS was on the Jimmy Fallon show in 2020, and they cleared out the subway car, and we filmed a show in it. And then they cleared out Grand Central Terminal, and we performed a song there. Guy smiled. He covered his mouth with his hand and whispered, "Wow, that's amazing." Yoongi leaned back in his seat too, satisfied with the smile from Guy. What Yoongi didn't know was there was a conflict brewing in Guy's mind. All this with Yoongi going on a walk, sharing food, overlooking the water, riding the subway, laughing, talking, and yes, even the people staring at him reminded him of times he spent with his old friend. Hojun hadn't grown up in the States like Guy had, so his English wasn't perfect and his mannerisms were a little weird. As long as he had Guy by his side, though, he didn't care, and neither did Guy. It was disconcerting that no one else saw Yoongi. Guy thought maybe he had actually gone crazy, but the strange looks didn't bother him so much. For the first time in ages, he didn't have the sinking feeling of loneliness squeezing his heart.